angle of the story is Matt Continetti of the Weekly Standard, who has an op-ed on this topic, and CNN contributor Will Cain, who is columnist for The Blaze. Thanks to both of you for being here today.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's start with Matt, because, Matt, you think the GOP is sort of missing the boat here, that they should address this issue of income inequality from a conservative viewpoint. Explain.
That's right. Well, I think so far conservatives have had two approaches to this issue of income inequality. On the one hand, there are some conservatives who say it's not an issue, it doesn't exist. And then on the other hand, there are some conservatives who say, no, it is an issue, but we need to find ways that government can alleviate the problem. Well, the one thing that no one is saying is that the founders of this country didn't believe it was an issue. In fact, they believed the purpose of government was simply to protect our natural rights, and that if you did that, you would obviously get inequalities of income and condition. No one's really making that argument, and so I think it'd be interesting if the GOP did it for once.
That's a tough argument to make, because it's kind of like, I know it's difficult to get that point across. So, Will, if it were you, how would you talk about income inequality as a Republican?
Yeah, unfortunately for some of our more liberal viewers, Matt and I aren't going to have a lot of disagreement on this. Honestly, my answer to income inequality would be, who cares? Or I would say almost, income inequality is a good thing. Here's why. Look, we have a system that has increased nominal income by 350% over 200 years, and it's pulled more people out of poverty than any economic system on the history of Earth. And we did it through the concept of free trade, not through a focus on equality. Now, it's easy to say, well, you know, economic growth is natural. That's not true. For 1,700 years, we had pretty much stagnant income growth, or marginal growth in income. And this, what we put together here on this society with free trade as the basis, is historically an aberration. I would suggest that income inequality correlates with we're all richer. We're all doing better off.
Okay, so some people hearing you might say, well, that's a pretty selfish standpoint, because the income inequality has grown in this country, right? The United States is sort of near the bottom if you look at the country's income equality percentages. The United States isn't exactly number one. And the other issue here is that if middle America doesn't have money to spend, then won't that eventually hurt the people who are making the most money?
Well, again, I think you have to change the conversation. When most people talk about income inequality growing, they're talking about a prism over the last 30 years. But they're not talking about the fact that over a much longer time frame, we're all growing much richer through the same system that is producing income inequality. It just so happens that the economic system that makes us all more wealthy also makes us more unequal. I think the argument the Republicans should put forward, and I think Matt has said something similar to this, is that is what Republicans should stand for. That they should explain this concept.
Matt, do you agree?
Well, I think there's been a lot of interest in the last couple of years in the American founding. And you see that with the best-selling biographies of the founders. You see that with the John Adams miniseries. And you see it, of course, in the Tea Party, which wants to get back to founding principles. But what we haven't had is a politician who said, well, what are those founding principles? And the founding principle was that people are equal, and that the purpose of government is to protect their natural equality, not to equalize incomes or material conditions, but to simply protect those natural rights. And I'd love to see the UN do a study of how well governments across the world are protecting our natural rights. I think it'd be very different from the studies that measure income inequality.
And I think, though, you know, on another connected topic, that the Occupy Wall Street poster says the deck is sort of stacked against a certain segment of the population with tax loopholes, and the people controlling the money really control our government. They make the rules, they control what lawmakers do. The deck is stacked against them. So how in the world can you have income equality?
Okay, that's a very different conversation. When you start talking about inequality as the production of corruption or criminality, that's something not many of us disagree on. When you have that kind of inequality, there's something that needs to be done. This is the great debate about Occupy Wall Street. Is Occupy Wall Street about corruption on Wall Street, about corruption in Washington, D.C., or is it more broadly about 1 verse 99? Is it more broadly about the concept of inequality? If it is that, the way Republicans should engage this is on the concept that inequality is not in and of itself a social ill. It correlates to us all doing better.
Okay, so this is really in the context of Republicans describing the Occupy Wall Street movement. Congressman Peter King was on Anderson Cooper last night, and here's how he described the protesters. Let's listen.
First of all, you try and listen to them, and they make almost no sense. These are people who are living in dirt. These were people who were involved with drugs, there were violence, there was rape. They're frustrated. Life is full of frustration. You know, they should go see a psychiatrist if they're that frustrated. They're angry people. They're angry people who are losers, who are on the outside and screaming. If they want to get involved, go into the system. Get involved, come up with concrete proposals. You don't do it by living in dirt. You don't do it by carrying out rapes, and you don't do it by carrying out and chanting anti-American slogans.
Okay, so Will, I heard your argument, and it's different what exact message the protesters want to get out. But some people would say, what's wrong with getting out a lot of different messages, as long as we're having this conversation? So, but I just want to address this question to Matt. When you hear Congressman King describe the protesters that way, what do you think? I mean, does that add to the conversation or the argument in this country?
Well, it's a point of view, certainly. Look, when I see these Occupy Wall Street people, I'm seeing a tradition that goes back 200 years. You can go back to the Oneida community or Brook Farm in America, in upstate New York, in the years before the Civil War, where people were coming together and trying to create the ideal society. That's what those tent cities are. They're trying to reorganize society because they believe that the way society exists is unjust. And so what I'm saying is, for Congressman King or for any other Republicans, you have to defend it on the level of ideas. You have to say that the society we have is a just society, because the basis of our society is the protection of natural right, not more property for one person or less property for another.
And Will, you're shaking your head, you're nodding.
Well, I mean, I think, personally, I try to apply this in all of my political analysis because, quite honestly, my ideology has better ideas. So have this conversation, have this debate on the level of ideas, not on attacking human beings. So as people, I agree with Matt. The congressman has much stronger ground to stand on by attacking their ideas. The problem with Occupy Wall Street is it's hard to pin them down on what their ideas are.
It is, but it has changed the conversation in this nation, don't you think?
Yeah, and
we are talking about things like income inequality, and, you know, we are talking about Wall Street and some of the stuff that went wrong on Wall Street that's never been punished. We are talking about that.
That's all true. That's all true.
Okay. Will Cain, Matt Continetti, thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more.
When you're a sports